My name is Kelly O'Brien, and I lead both the Alliance for Regional Development and the Chicago Central Area Committee. If you're not familiar with our work, the Alliance was created in 2012 following a publication by the world's leading think tank on economic development. And they concluded that 21 counties in the Milwaukee, Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana corridor operate as an economic unit. But because of the state lines, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, we don't always work together the way that would really benefit all three states. So the Alliance was created as a neutral platform to bring together the leaders from government, academia, and the private sector. If you logged on a few minutes early, you would have seen on the PowerPoint that was rolling that we're hosting a summit the week of November 16th. This will be our 7th summit in partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. Unfortunately, because of COVID, it will not be an in-person conference, but it will be a virtual conference. So everybody is welcome. Please watch your emails for more details. We will be discussing in-depth disruption, driving innovation, and embracing economic change. We've already lined up some really great speakers, and I hope that you're able to join us for the summit. The Chicago Central Area Committee is a 56-year-old civic group that was created by the first Mayor Daley at a time when businesses were leaving the central area for the suburbs, and leaders in the business community came together and started the planning that has really resulted in Chicago being the global destination that it is today. CCAC is a membership organization, and if you have any questions or interest in being involved, please contact me directly. I see that the Deputy Governor has joined us. Deputy Governor Ruiz? It looks like we're still having a few technical problems, but I can see you. Can you hear me? All right, we're going to continue to get those worked out. I know this is a conversation.
Good afternoon.
Oh, we got it working.
And my internet, I don't know.
We're having some problems, some continued technical issues. We will get those worked out, and we'll be sure to get to your questions. So as many of you know, we kicked off the webinars back in late March, and we focused on pandemic programming until June 1st, when we rebranded it with the same tagline that I mentioned we're using for the summit that will be hosted the week of November 16th. These webinars have served as a platform to share information, best practices, and I just couldn't be more thrilled with the audience that we've been able to attract literally from all over the country. I have to admit, I was a bit surprised when I started getting messages from people outside of our mega region, the Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. I know Michigan is also very involved with our programming, but I've literally received messages from coast to coast, and I really appreciate people that contact me directly. Any suggestions that you have for speakers and programs, we'll do our best to honor. So let's see if we've got the Deputy Governor back with us.
I was trying to go wireless, it didn't work, so I had to go back and connect to the wire. So hopefully this is a better connection.
It is perfect, and I'm so glad we got that worked out. So welcome. I'm so thankful. I know that you are so busy, so for you to take the time to join us today really means so much to all of the audience members. And for those of you that are not familiar with Deputy Governor Ruiz's background, let me share that it is extremely impressive. He currently oversees the state's education system from early childhood through higher education, including 852 school districts, 48 community colleges, 9 public universities. As if that wasn't enough, he also oversees the Illinois Student Assistance Commission and the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. Because of his background as a very distinguished lawyer, he currently serves as the president of the Chicago Bar Association, and he lectures at the University of Chicago Law School. He was a partner at a law firm, Drinker Biddle, which is now Fager Drinker, and they are a long-standing member of CCAC, and we're so very grateful for your continued support. For those of you with Fager Drinker that happen to dial in today. He has served as a management consultant, and the deputy governor has been dedicated to public service his entire career. And honestly, the list just goes on and on. But what really struck me is your former work as the vice president of the Chicago Board of Education, the interim CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, the chairman of the Illinois State Board of Education. So I would imagine that being on the front lines of those specific entities has really helped you be a very hands-on deputy governor for education.
It has. Frankly, it was 16 continuous years of being involved at the federal. I was also on the, thanks to former Secretary Arnie Duncan, who appointed me to the U.S. Department of Education's Equity and Excellence Commission in 2011. I served on that for a couple of years. So I literally had done federal, state, and local levels of service in education for parallel with my legal career for 17 years or so, and then 3 years at the Chicago as president of the Chicago Park District. So luckily, I was at a great law firm that allowed me to do public service while serving my clients, and so I almost did it in parallel, and was always had a second volunteer job while I was a partner at the firm.
Well, Illinois could not be luckier to have you. And I know you have some information that you want to share with the audience. And then we absolutely want to hear from you and invite the audience to use the Q&A button. If there's something that you would like for me to directly ask the deputy governor, please submit it through the Q&A button. Otherwise, I did activate the screen sharing. So if you have a few slides that you'd like to show the audience, I think the technology hopefully is going to work for us.
So are you sharing the slides or am I sharing the slides? I'm sorry.
I think we discussed that you would, but I can try to pull them up if you're having a problem.
No, I'll pull them up. I am having a problem. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. Let me work on this. I should hopefully have them pretty handy.
Oh, let's see here if I might have solved it.
It just takes a moment because I had the slides up for the intro, so it will literally just take a quick second, hopefully, to get this to work.
All right, you're all seeing the slides?
There you go.
I got to the button first.
Okay. All right, excellent.
Luckily, and so just wanted to briefly give folks some perspective on the timeline of what seems like is a very long spring and first half of the summer that began, and I remember vividly, March 6th, the very first school that closed in the state of Illinois, Jacqueline Vaughn. It was a Friday evening when it was discovered a teacher had contracted the coronavirus. And so that school was closed for a couple of weeks. And then on March 12th, quickly we saw the levels of infection rapidly rising. And so the governor declared a state of emergency. And by that time, universities had already been closing. And I remember tracking, it was the universities first who were taking some precautions and sending students home. And then there started being a rolling closing of schools before the governor ever declared schools closed. I know I had a statewide tracker and a map, and every day I would brief the governor. And then until finally on March 17th, State Superintendent Carmen Ayala announced that we were going to close schools effective a few days later. And then on March 20th, the stay-at-home order went into effect, and remote learning in Illinois began. And well, on 10 days later, on March 30th. And guidance was put out fairly quickly by the State Board of Education, and There were webinars and briefing all 852 superintendents across the state and principals across the state. We were one of the first states in the nation to have comprehensive remote learning guidelines out. There was a lot of latitude given because previously, if you wanted to go to remote learning, you would have to provide 5 hours or 300 minutes of instruction. That was waived, and a lot of latitude was given because, again, we thrust school districts in doing remote learning on a moment's notice when some were prepared and some were not. And so grading policies were in essence suspended as well. Students who whatever grade they were at that point in time couldn't be lowered. They could improve their grade, but by and large, most districts did that. And then the school years ended, and summer school, we did go back and allow for in-person summer school. I'm not aware of a single district who actually took us up on that, and all have done summer school remotely. And on June 23rd, ISB released the guidance for district reopening that has been topic of a lot of discussion, and I suspect we'll have some questions today. Backtracking a bit, March 25th, I believe it was when the CARES Act was passed that provided funding, and I'll briefly touch upon that for, well, that's when businesses receive funding, but also schools, and schools in the state of Illinois received about $564 million, but that was according to a Title I formula. So the State Board of Education was able to retain about $54 million from that 564. And again, districts across the state received it according to their Title I student populations. So for example, it was then about $510 million. Chicago Public Schools received about $204 million of that $510 million. So roughly 40%, because they have a very high, well, they're the largest school district in the state, and they also have a very high Title I. And Title I refers to students, what we also refer to as free and reduced lunch, or students, frankly, living in poverty. And then there is an additional fund of about $108 million that was provided to the governor. And that was in the governor's discretion, my education team's discussion in this office, to determine how we allocated those funds. And again, about $108 million. And so $10 million was to support early childhood education. For child care centers, which have been devastated. And there's a whole nother series that my first of work and a stream of work that my first assistant, Teresa Hawley, has worked very hard on, and closing down child care and reopening emergency child care facilities in March and April, and then providing new grants for that recently as well that aren't shown on this page. And then in K through 12, of the 108 million, 47.5 million, and then the State Board of Education, I mentioned earlier, was able to take some of the CARES Act funds. So they'll have roughly about $100 million and do the bulk of that allocation to support districts who frankly weren't prepared to do remote learning because of technology, but because of broadband access. We just saw in the news yesterday here in Chicago that the mayor is launching new initiatives with CPS and technology providers to make sure that everybody, about 100,000, I believe I saw the number was, so students will now have access and equipment to make sure that if they're going to go remote, and it's still undetermined by CPS, I suspect they will start remotely, that they can do it much more robustly than they did last March. And of course, on July 23rd, we released new guidance. So on June 23rd, the healthcare focused guidance from the State Board of Ed. A month later, on July 23rd, is strictly education related guidance that provides for either in-person, remote, or hybrid education. And the standards are now raised. I mentioned relaxing the standards earlier. Well, they've gone back. And so it's going to be a lot more rigorous this year, and grades are back, and 5 hours of instruction are required again. And so if we're going to do remote learning, districts are going to have to do it a lot better. And then higher education, coming back to this, 17 million, roughly almost 18 million to our 48 community colleges in Illinois, 27 to our 12 public universities, and a few other grants there. The Illinois Math, IMSA is the Illinois Math and Science Academy, is also part of my portfolio. Our one residential high school that serves sophomores, juniors, and seniors, very prestigious math and science institute in Aurora, Illinois. And so as part of my portfolio, they've got some funding to help. They have a unique expertise in remote learning and technology. And so helping themselves improve and also then sharing their light, not keeping it under a bushel basket, but sharing it with the rest of the state. So we supported them in doing that. And so reopening, which is a topic that you see on the news every day, and I deal with every day. Yesterday was school sports, but today we're back to the core educational functions and some of the considerations that, of course, and I've worked very closely with Dr. Ezike, and I know Carmen Ayala, Brian Durham, the head of the Community College Board, and Ginger Ostro, the head of the Illinois Board of Higher Education. We work constantly in those first 3 months, March, April, May. I'm here in my office in the Thompson Center, and from March, April, and May, I was here 7 days a week. There were about 15 of us core senior staff in the governor's office. The governor was here 7 days a week. We were here 7 days a week. So I think it was 87 straight days reporting to the Thompson Center for some very long days. It was like being a first-year associate again at the law firm. So we worked very closely. We still, thankfully, we're getting weekends off now, and I'm not working those as many hours, but we still work very closely with the Illinois Department of Public Health, and all the guidance is driven by the science and the health metrics that we are reported out every day, and making sure that Dr. Ezike is the ultimate word on all the guidance that's put out by the State Board of Education. In fact, nothing gets out with her literally approving it, and she's deputized a team at the University of Illinois at Chicago of infectious disease experts as well, who help review all the guidance that both the Board of Higher Education, the Community College Board, and the State Board of Education put out. So very concerned about bringing students back safely. And if we can't, then they should continue remotely, or if they aren't able to socially distance, then they've got to do a hybrid model so they can spread students out. But at the same time, I'm also very concerned about the COVID slide. It's akin to summer learning loss that we see in summers typically, but this one's going to be more profound, and it's going to stay with some of our students for many years. And so, we want to get students back for in-person instruction, but balancing the primary responsibility to keep everybody in the school community safe. There are social emotional needs. There's a number of articles and studies, and pediatricians have come out and worried about the social emotional needs of students, which have been adversely impacted. And so bringing more normalcy to some of our students' lives is essential. But again, doing it safely, and they are at times very difficult factors to reconcile. The technological capacity that, frankly, in rural Illinois, you have complete dead zones, and even the $500 million of federal assistance and the broadband initiatives we're doing at the state level, frankly, just don't stand up wire fast enough, where no wire currently exists, where you've had some community colleges that literally would provide broadband access in the parking lot, and students would come and do their coursework sitting in their cars, socially distanced from other students, in the school park, in the community college parking lot. Childcare is, as I mentioned earlier, we had to shut down childcare and then rebuild it in an emergency system, unprecedented, that falls within my team, and it's an important, not only for education, and Illinois has one of the higher laws in the nation in terms of children 14 and younger are not legally supposed to be left home alone. And so if you have two parents who are both essential workers, childcare is rather important for their children. And if you're a teacher and you're expected to work full-time from home, yet your school is operating remotely, you've got a lot to balance and juggle. And it's frankly, almost unrealistic to expect that teachers are going to be able to, provide for their students as well as take care of their own children. And especially when we're asking folks to socially distance and not bring outside childcare providers into your home. And all the logistics that I've just touched upon. It is quite an enormous undertaking for our universities that have to contemplate bringing students back, contemplate going from only single dormitories, community colleges where you have career and technical education that cannot be performed remotely. If you're going to get a certificate in welding, you can't weld as we're doing here on Zoom. You've got to do it with an instructor, and some of that welding equipment is hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you can't access it unless you're at the community college campus. So across the board, there are challenges that we face. And just lastly, the guidance that was issued by the State Board of Education, and this is where you'll hear a lot of discussion. Most of what we tell districts, and there's a strong mantra in education, not only in Illinois, but nationally, is local control. Other than the city of Chicago, there are 851 independently elected school boards that govern each of those 851 school districts. In Chicago, we have an appointed school district appointed by the mayor, but that board is charged with governing the Chicago Public Schools. I was vice president of that board at one time for about 4 years under Mayor Manuel. So we've given a lot of latitude to districts, guidelines that they should follow. There are actually five requirements, and that is that they have to use appropriate levels of personal protective equipment, but that really means that everybody must wear a mask at all times. There are some exceptions for those who can't for medical reasons, can't wear a mask. They can wear a face shield, or for teachers who, particularly for English language learners, special education students, sometimes needing to see the face of their teacher is important. And so we're allowing for face shields in lieu of the face covering, but face covering is preferred. Cannot have more than 50 individuals in any space, indoors or outdoors. Outdoors, if you have more than 50, you can have groups. And within those 50, they have to be socially distanced, and they must be more than 30 feet apart. And in the classroom, 6 feet is generally the rule. We gave some latitude on this. If you're wearing face coverings, there's a debate on whether it's 4 feet sufficient, is 5 feet. And in the interest of allowing schools to work with that, we didn't specify the 6 feet, but people understand the 6 feet is the preferable amount. And everybody has to have symptom checks and temperature checks. They won't, in order to not have folks congregate at the doorway, we're not requiring that schools stand there as I'm required to do every morning when I come to the Thompson Center. I have to have my temperature taken at the door. Building's officially closed. There are very few of us here, so it's not a big crowd that gets their temperature checked. In a school, it could be thousands of people. So through technology and apps, parents will do that with their students at home and certify that it's been done and they don't have a temperature over 100. And then districts will have to spend a lot more money and probably hire a lot more custodians or service providers that will have to do increased sanitation and disinfection on a daily basis and throughout the day. So those are the hardcore requirements. This, as was noted, can lead to some debate and even in some cases some litigation. And so but again, Dr. Ezekiel is adamant about these things. We strongly believe, and if you read even opinion pieces in the New York Times as of yesterday, it endorses this thinking that if we're going to have students in person, this is the minimal amount of protection we need to provide.
Well, this is very insightful, and I always like to give plugs to our CCAC members. We have Fog COVID-19, which is a company that offers sanitation and disinfection. So if there's any of our viewers that would like information on how to contact them, please let me know. But Deputy Governor, you laid out those 5 requirements, and one question is, how are you going to enforce that? What will you do if you find out that a school district is not following those guidelines?
Well, there's a number of factors, and right now, and we'll see if what Congress ends up doing. But right now, there is no limitation of liability, and so arguably, we've set up through these 5 requirements a standard of community care that I would suggest. If I was back in my law practice, although I was a corporate and securities partner, or I wasn't a litigator, but I would suggest to clients that if you're not following those, a good plaintiff's lawyer could make a case if folks in your school community get sick, that you perhaps didn't do all you could to protect them. And so universities raised the alarm bells on this first, and then school districts started realizing, like, wait a second. So there's that, risk avoidance and not wanting to litigate these things. And the other factor that came about, I would say in the last month or so, was all the districts, most all have liability insurance. It's a prudent thing to do. All their insurers told them, we're not covering COVID claims. So I think a lot of them, which is why, frankly, some have said we're starting remote because we can't take the risk of folks getting sick here because we have no limitation of liability. There's no indemnification. The governor was able to do that through the Emergency Management Act for healthcare providers. And so educators and districts wanted the same protection, and we simply legally can't do that through executive order. The General Assembly could. They're not in session. And Congress, I know, is going to be debating that probably in the next week or so. And we'll see what comes of that. But right now, the fear of liability should be a strong motivator for folks to do the right thing. The Illinois Education Association and the Illinois Federation of Teachers just yesterday announced that they believe that if healthcare standards aren't met by districts, it's an strikeable issue. And so they said that they will strike. So that's the other factor you've got to consider, is that if your teachers don't come back, you can't have in-person instruction. So you've got to do all you can to make it safe for everybody to be there. And regardless of the issue of a strike or not, you should hopefully be incentivized to make sure you're keeping everybody safe. I mean, I would think that's one of the first and foremost, yes, to educate both universities, community colleges, and our elementary and high school districts. But, first and foremost, is to protect your school communities. Particularly for elementary and high schools, you're in local parentis, and you should take care of those children as if they were your own. So they should do all you can. And of course, we have 3 cases. Two in which State Board of Education is and the governor is defendant. One where the State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health a few weeks ago, they filed suit against the school district and 2 private schools who affirmatively said shortly after these guidelines came out that we're not going to follow them. And so we believe that via the Emergency Management Act, the governor has the authority to, and via that authority, the IDPH and the ISBE feel that they can make these requirements. So all 3 cases have hearings next week. We'll see where they land. But again, I think some of these other factors are going to influence districts to hopefully do the right thing. That doctors across the country have agreed these are the minimum requirements that districts should follow.
Great. And again, I want to remind the audience, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button. Deputy Governor, obviously you're very focused on Illinois, but I would imagine that you have a national network of people that are in the same chair that you're in. And one thing that I think a lot of people are curious about, particularly following the governor's announcement yesterday with sports being delayed, what are you hearing in terms, what can you tell parents that have students that are, star athletes, that they were depending on the ability for that athlete to get a scholarship, and now there's great concern that's, how is that going to work? What are you hearing?
Yeah, the students who would be seniors this year and those decisions would be made, chances are the scouts had them on their radar last year. And I talked to the athletic director at the University of Illinois. And so it's not going to be held against them. But more importantly, the Illinois High School Association, and they govern high school sports in Illinois, and the Illinois Elementary School Association, which governs elementary school sports, which is really 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. We work closely with both organizations, and I think I commend the IHSA's board yesterday, who took the prudent step of delaying, postponing, not canceling any of the sports. Now, the calendar is truncated, but they did the prudent thing, and our guidance, coincidentally, but not so coincidentally, supports their decisions and supports the way they're planning on going about their 3 seasons of sports. And so some fall sports that are deemed, and speaking of working with other states, if you see our guidelines that the governor issued yesterday for all sports, and that's private club sports, school sports, children, adults, it's all sports, except for professional or collegiate level competitive sports. It applies to everybody equally. They're modeled on some other states that have done the same thing, the U.S. Olympic Committee, others, so again, we're very, very happy to follow what other folks have done, and has been, hard work that other folks have put in. So if you look at New Jersey's guidance, it's not that dissimilar from ours, and so we're happy to take the work that's been developed elsewhere, and if it works, to frankly borrow it. And so we do. I've talked to folks in my position in Ohio and other states from time to time and share notes, but thankfully, there's a Council of Chief State School Officers that Dr. Carmen Ayala belongs to, and we share a lot of information across the country, and it's out there publicly. But I'm pretty happy that early on, Illinois' remote learning guidance was referenced by other states, and I'm reading that opinion piece that Dr. Emanuel and a few other doctors wrote in the New York Times yesterday. It's good to see that a lot of things that they're suggesting and recommending are in fact things we're doing in Illinois. And again, our guidance has been out for over a month. So I'm glad that the sports will have a chance. Keep our fingers crossed that we all do the right thing today, so we can keep our positivity rates, so that schedule can be honored and can begin in December, when most of the high risk sports would begin. And football is a higher risk. Basketball is deemed immediate or a medium risk. And so if you look, they're all categorized. And again, it's categorized by the level of physical contact between competitors and the ability to socially distance, while either on the sidelines or in the dugout or on the field of play. And so cross country is another example where that can continue. However, the largest elementary school meet that happens every year, and I believe it's Normal, Illinois, 5,000 spectators go out, I'm told. I've not been before, but the executive director tells me 5,000 people show up for that one. Hundreds of athletes. That's not prudent at this time. So cross country is being allowed. It's deemed low risk if the runners can, socially distance. And unfortunately, they're not going to have their 5,000 spectators cheering them on at any events. That you got to keep those, again, groups of 50, socially distanced. If there's multiple groups of 50, they have to be more than 30 feet apart.
And it is important to reinforce your remark about doing the right thing. I know the governor just said yesterday that we're starting to go in the wrong direction in terms of the number of positive cases and the percentage. So I do remind the audience to please, now is not the time to be lax. It is the time to really avoid crowds, wear masks, wash your hands, be extra diligent, because it really helps everybody.
It truly does. I mean, we all have to do our part. That if we truly want to see our athletes have the opportunity to compete, then it's incumbent upon all of us to wear and fully cover it, both nose and mouth. You can't wear it around your chin, that I see a lot of folks doing. and around your chin, it doesn't do any good.
Right.
And if you're out and about, do all you can to avoid crowds. Not the time. It's unfortunately summertime, and we'd love to congregate and go to barbecues and see our friends and family. And we're going to have to pay the price now so that we can enjoy healthy lives and our regained, full freedoms next summer.
Right. So I know we've got a few questions. So I wonder if briefly, because this is a big question, but what are the guidelines for students returning and going into another grade? So, I mean, after kind of months of not really having a traditional education and being in that adjustment period, a lot of parents, I think, don't think that their students probably ended this last school year on their A game. So now they're starting another grade and maybe they're starting a little behind. How do you gauge that, and how do you help them to quickly catch up, especially if we are, continuing to be in this adjustment period?
Well, two things. The guidance that the State Board of Education issued and geared toward, elementary and high school students, they've suggested there's going to have to be a lot of assessment in the first few weeks of kind of really gauging if you were a fifth grader in May or June, and you're now in about, over 60% of our districts will start class in 2 weeks, just about 2 weeks. So start times, vary, but Chicago Public Schools traditionally has gone the latest and starts the Tuesday after Labor Day, but there's some districts that return the week of August 12th. In fact, over 500 of them. So, that first few weeks, you're going to have to gauge and do a lot of assessment and see, are you truly at sixth grade level in all your courses, particularly math and reading. And so that's going to be important. And then determine what quickly you're going to have to do. And again, the phenomenon of summer learning loss is real. And so this is something that teachers deal with every August, September, but this is going to be more acute. And so they're really going to have to focus and potentially a sixth grade math teacher may be doing some review of fifth grade concepts. And so that's going to have to happen. The one silver lining that I'm hoping comes out of this is that, and I did mention earlier that we are now requiring that you have the full 5 hours of instruction time per day, even if you're remote. And we went further. It's not a mandate, but it's a strong requirement that at least half that time be, as we're discussing right now, face-to-face with your teacher. It's difficult because, again, not every district has the technological capacity, but they did get $500 million. Not all of them got $500 million, but it was spread around all of this. So there was a lot of federal support. Hopefully, come next week, Congress will deem that it's not enough, and it's not, frankly, and they need additional support so they can purchase all this PPE and enhance remote learning capability. But hopefully, that remote learning capability doesn't go away. And as Arne Duncan used to always use the phrase "time on task" when he was leading CPS, that sometimes you just need more time on task. And remote learning will allow us a scalable solution to provide students with more time on task to, again, remediate some losses of learning that occurred, and to just have additional enrichment time and self learning time that they can, and have great tools and that they can access via technology that can give them that more time on task that they're inevitably going to need.
Excellent. So to an audience question, it reads, what do you see as lasting impacts of COVID-19 on planning for new schools or remodeling existing schools?
Unfortunately, it's not education policy per se, but fiscal policy that, an impact not only on health is obviously been an impact on our economy. And so I am concerned about the impact on our economy. The state is, like every other family business, has suffered revenue losses. And so we'll see. And thus, not to advocate a position here, but I will. And when it comes to supporting our state, I'm not shy about it. State and local governments need support as well to provide all the services that we're providing. Education is a public good, and so in order to do this, we're going to need support in the next bill from Congress. It's a point of debate. I think the Senate doesn't want to provide any support for state and local governments, but we need the help as well because we've been impacted. So if we're going to have capital funds that would go to fund school improvement, we're going to need that help. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at probably some austerity budgets in the future, and we're not alone. Other states will be in the same boat. So we passed a new. We had a task force last year that I chaired on capital improvements and how we spend capital dollars, and we. In his first year, the governor passed a substantial capital plan, and so in fact, last week this time we were at the University of Chicago because the U.S. Secretary of Energy was there announcing new quantum internet, and part of that capital funding went to the University of Chicago and the University of Illinois to build a quantum exchange in Hyde Park, and there'll be another facility, but $200 million that went to that we feel is critical to the future of Illinois and frankly to U.S. competitiveness. And if you talk to the chancellor of the UIUC or President Zimmer at U of C, they're adamant that either we dominate this or we're going to be left behind, and so it's critical. But again, those are capital funds that go to premier educational institutions in our state. That we hope that the next time there's an opportunity like this, we can support. They're pursuing this quantum exchange, building it here in Illinois, in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, and the U.S. Department of Energy will announce grants in a few weeks. So that money could be bolstered by a huge influx of federal dollars, at least several hundred million more. So there's an ROI there as well.
Yeah, there's something to definitely keep our eye out for.
Yep. So yeah, the fiscal impact is what's going to be important, and so that's going to be critical, that we hopefully get that support from Congress.
Absolutely. So we do have a few more questions we want to get to. The next question reads, children's anxiety and depression is at an all-time high. Are schools going to do more as far as emotional wellness? Would it be possible to have a counselor speak to students more frequently or make it to class so students can have added emotional support?
Yeah, that's one thing that was provided for, and I did note in the slide, social emotional concerns are a huge issue, and I always say every societal problem that can possibly exist walks into a classroom every day. When we were traditionally going to class every day, it still exists, and unfortunately now it's not walking into a classroom, and yet your students are still impacted, and there are numerous articles about the number of children who just fell off the radar. They literally never signed on to a class, just were out of touch. We have no idea what they were doing for those 2 or 3 months at the end of the school year. And so it doesn't bode well for their social emotional well-being. And telehealth is something that was able to be expanded, and that hopefully schools in every district that has the autonomy to do this, but we've been promoting it, that use counseling services as we're doing now. That there's a lot of privacy laws surrounding students at the federal level and at the state level, but we've allowed some latitude on telehealth so that more of it can be done even remotely, and provide counseling services that otherwise would be done in person.
And I can just tell you, from a personal perspective, I have had a number of conversations with friends that are talking about the anxiety that their children are experiencing. And it's quite concerning, and something that absolutely mental health needs to be a priority for this country and for our students.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one last question. So again, thank you to the audience for submitting questions. If there are additional questions, we can always forward them to the Deputy Governor, but I will read. It says, has the ISBE, and you may want to explain to folks that may not be familiar with that, but has the ISBE considered providing guidance or legislative action to assist teachers who are not medically able to return to the classroom and may not slot into a virtual or remote learning program being offered by the local district? These teachers are being placed in difficult positions to use up sick days, take up paid leave, or consider early retirement.
Yes, the Illinois State Board of Education, ISBE, not to be confused with the Illinois State Board of Elections, also known as ISBE, but ISB, as it's typically called, the Board of Education. And that the one thing I'll quickly explain there is there's a 9-member board that governs the State Board of Education, and the agency is also known as, so sometimes it's confusing because you could be referring to the 9-member board, State Board of Education, or the agency itself. But generally it's referring to the agency. Yes, this is something I've been in discussions with. In fact, had a very long discussion with the presidents of both statewide teachers unions just last Thursday. And it's something that is governed by 852 different collective bargaining agreements. There's a lot of hope for legislation. Unfortunately, our General Assembly is not in session. The President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House could decide if they want to bring folks back. They haven't. We had the one emergency session in May, and we got a few key things done, but I don't, not holding my breath that they'll go back in time to do anything for teachers who may have to report to school, to the classroom in the next few weeks. So the announcement from the IEA and the IFT yesterday that if they feel that it's not safe, that frankly all the teachers will unite and potentially take a work action. But individually, if you feel safe, we use our bully pulpit to tell districts and principals, you can't force anybody. And again, if something, heaven forbid, were to happen to that individual, you'd be looking at a heck of a lawsuit that you force somebody to go to work. And, again, they were to get sick. So I think most districts take that seriously and don't want to incur that liability or potential liability. And we're looking for other ways to make sure that, again, and we did that in the spring, where particularly at the university level, we asked, and we frankly didn't force anybody, but we, asked, strenuously, don't lay off people, keep everybody, because instantly we went into a stay-at-home situation, and there still wasn't a federal package to help people. So almost every school district, and because state money that had already been appropriated for this past year wasn't being taken away. So you shouldn't take incomes away either. And most people honored everybody's employment situation, kept every school bus drivers who couldn't drive those schools, everybody still got paid. This coming fall, different situation. We probably won't strongly require districts and universities and community colleges to keep everybody on the payroll, but folks shouldn't be adversely impacted because of the healthcare. Just you wouldn't normally under normal circumstances, and so there should be accommodations made. And so we're looking since last Thursday. I had to get sports done yesterday. Now I'm turning my attention to this issue pretty strongly and other enforcement things that we can do.
Excellent. Well, I know that we have run out of time. We've gone over today, but we started a little bit late, and this was such an important topic that we wanted to make sure that we allowed the audience to get as much information as possible. So, Deputy Governor, what would you say your parting words to the audience that have school-age children from kindergarten up to higher ed? What can you say to give them comfort, and what kind of advice do you give parents today?
Well, I got a sophomore in college and a sophomore in high school as well, two sons. And, I'm talking to them a lot more. I mean, again, look for your silver linings where you can find them. We've had a lot more family dinners around the table that we didn't have before. So I'm asking them a lot more about their schooling and what they're feeling, and then reaching out to the school and learning what their process is for determining whether or not your child goes back, and trying to communicate with teachers as well. It's difficult. Teachers have a lot of parents and families to talk to, but checking in and still, in essence, having that virtual parent-teacher conference that I know I did with my son, my sophomores, teachers and counselors, this past spring, assuming they're amenable to it. But it's an individual family decision on what you feel comfortable doing, and whether or not, in most districts, that's the other thing that that I did not mention, but we've strongly encouraged that it's a family decision, that if they choose to go in person, if they're offering in-person instruction, that's great. But if they're not comfortable, you must provide them with remote learning services and make sure that it's as robust as in-person instruction. Most districts have offered that. CPS is offering that, and nobody's pushed back. It's an additional burden on districts, but their first duty is to their families and their students, and so hopefully they will do that. But I'm just talking to particularly my sophomore in high school, just talking to him more about what he's feeling, what he's thinking, if he feels he's getting the concept, as instruction is helping him achieve what he needs to achieve, and that he's just in a good space otherwise. 16-year-olds have a lot of issues, but this pandemic has created much more on their young shoulders to bear, and the adults in their lives have to be much more conscious of it.
I don't think that could be said any better. 100% true. And I know there's a lot of parents that have a whole new appreciation for the teachers. And we've often said, teachers are so underpaid and underappreciated, but hopefully as a society, we're really starting to understand the great value, and that they all have the patience of Job on a day in, day out basis. So, Deputy Governor, I want to thank you so much, not only for joining us today, but for the hard work that you are doing, for being, 7 days a week for months on end, and now countless hours. And I have no doubt that you're awake in the middle of the night thinking about strategies and doing what you need to do to help.
I will note, the governor is a really early riser and a voracious reader, so I get a lot of text messages at 4:30 in the morning.
Well, I have no doubt, and the governor and his team, really have done an excellent job of trying to navigate the citizens, the residents, through this COVID situation. And I do want to give a shout out to the teachers and the principals, the administration of all the schools, the school district, the boards, everybody that's involved in trying to address this. It is unprecedented times that we're living in, but there are solutions. And if we work together, we can assure that the next generation gets the education that it needs and is positioned to, really help make sure that we do things the best that we can do right now. We have to work together. And that's what the CCAC and the Alliance, the purpose of bringing these webinars, and it takes, everybody's zoomed out, so to take the time to join us is very much appreciated. Deputy Governor, I hope that you'll join us again when, as things continue to unfold, and parents and students and administrators and people around the state love hearing from you and getting their questions answered. So thank you for your time today.
Pleasure.
To everybody, please stay well, stay strong. We're going to be slowing down a little bit in August, but we will have a few webinars. The next one is scheduled for August 13th. So please watch your emails for that. And again, if you have any questions or there's anything I can do, please reach out to me directly. So with that, I'm going to sign off and say thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Be well, everybody.